Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on the changes coming to regulatory legislations in 2020, which now that I say it out loud, I've realized is just in over 3 weeks. My name is Akriti Goyal, and I'm a business consultant here at the NCEC, the National Chemical Emergency Centre, and I will be chairing today's session. NCEC has been running webinars on the European regulatory legislations for the last 2 years now. And if you are interested in hearing in more details about a specific field, such as poison centers, then please do visit our website www.the-ncec.com and you should be able to find this information. As we all know, the world of regulatory compliance is ever changing. And in 2020, we are going to witness changes to some very important regulatory legislations. However, before we dwell deeper into the contents of today, I thought I'll give a brief introduction of NCEC for those of you who are not familiar with us. Established in 1973, initially set up as a government body to provide specialist 24/7 emergency response advice by trained emergency responders directly supporting the UK emergency services, NCEC has since been privatized. We are now part of Ricardo plc, which is a global engineering and environment consultancy. Today, we support more than 550 chemical companies around the world in making sure they are compliant to legislations and are ready for any chemical emergency incident. Now, for today's session, we will be focusing on 3 key regulatory changes. Changes coming to REACH Annex 2, where the European Commission is hoping to bring the annex in line with the CLP regulations by introducing some new amendments. We will then talk about a new substances of concern in products, or the SCIP database, that is being designed to be launched very soon. And finally, we will look at the possible extension to the Poison Centre notification deadline for consumer use mixtures, and what all these 3 changes could signify for you and your business, and what steps you should be taking to remain compliant. Leading today's session, we have Caroline Raine with us. Caroline is the Associate Director for Regulatory Consultancy here at NCEC, a founder member and current chairman of the British Association of Dangerous Goods Professionals, as well as a council member of Chemical Hazard Communication Society. She has over 15 years of expertise in the regulatory field and works closely with trade associations, providing legislative advice to the DFT Working Party Groups of Transport Regulation and the HSE Chemical Stakeholder Forum. She also sits on the European Chemical Agency working groups and has been very active in the guidance provided by ECHA on various regulatory topics. We both are very keen in hearing your thoughts and any questions you might have during the webinar. So please do feel free to use the right-hand side panel to ask any questions. We will try and take up as many as possible at the end of today's session, or we'll follow up with you directly afterwards. So without any further delay, I would now like to hand over to Caroline, who will take you through today's webinar.
Thank you very much. And what a lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Akriti. So, as Akriti has already mentioned, we have quite a jam-packed agenda where we're going to look at the REACH Annex 2, the SCIP database. We'll talk about poison centres, the REACH enforcement, nanomaterials and polymers. And then we'll have a bit of a question and answer session. So we're going to start off with a poll question, if that's okay. I'm interested to know which of these regulatory updates you're most interested in. And you can see that you only have 5 options to go with. We've taken the poison centres out of there because our polls will only let us have 5 answers. So if you could just give me which ones you're most interested in hearing.
Well, we've got a fair mix of people actually, but the highest amount of people are interested in the REACH Annex 2 changes. However, since this was a multiple answer question, I would be quite interested to know the actual results and say if we've got people answering for more than one, or is it just based on one change that they've entered here. But any thoughts on this poll question, Caroline?
Yeah, it's good to see that all of them are of interest, really, seeing as we're going to spend a few minutes on each area. So I guess we picked the right topics to talk about, haven't we? Which is good to see. So yes, I guess without any further ado, really, we'll move on to the REACH Annex 2 changes. Okay, so we have a draft regulation out at the moment. So there is a draft of the REACH Annex 2 regulation. It has been through consultation, and hopefully it will be published soon. I say hopefully because apparently it's applicable from the 1st of January 2020, and therefore we would be expecting to see it being published soon. I think it's similar to the problems that the Poison Centre piece of legislation is going through, in that it's the timescales that we need to be having in place to get this through and published, and in order to make live. All of the safety data sheets will need to be then updated by the 31st of December 2022. Now, the REACH Annex 2 regulation is aligning with the 6th and 7th revised editions of GHS, the globally harmonised system, and it's aligning with the requirements for nanomaterials. It's also clarifying the requirements that are related to the poison centres and the UFIs, so the unique formula identifiers. So if we start with section 1, section 1.1, the UFI, the unique formula identifier, and a declaration if it's in nano form needs to be included. And within section 2.3, other hazards, information on whether or not the substance or mixture meets the criteria for persistent, bioaccumulative and toxic, or very persistent and very bioaccumulative, and if it's an endocrine disrupting properties also needs to be included. Within section 3, the specific concentration limit and M factor shall be indicated if available, and likewise the acute toxicity estimate shall be included if it is also available. Then if it's REACH registered and it covers a nanoform, then that nanoform must also be specified within section 3. Table 1.1 has also been updated, so there has been a change to the list of hazard classes, hazard categories and concentration limits for which a substance shall be listed, and therefore this table has been updated. So for example, a skin sensitizer CAT1 or CAT1B is now at greater than 0.1, whereas a skin sensitizer CAT1A is at greater than 0.01. Section 9 has changes to the physical properties. So there's a change to the order. There are some things that have been dropped. So for example, odour threshold has been dropped, and there are some new things that have been introduced. For example, particle characteristics. Also within section 9, within 9.2, there's a requirement to add certain properties if they're relevant for safe use. And in 9.2.2, there are other safety considerations to include. So for example, maybe if it's self-accelerating, polarization temperature needs to be included. Then within the transport section, within section 14.7, there are changes of the wording. So transport in bulk according to Annex 2 of MARPOL and the IBC code will become maritime transport in bulk according to IMO instruments. Now that's a lot of changes to take into account and consideration. It isn't all of them. As usual, I always encourage people to go back to the source legislation, but a reminder of the timings. So it's implemented or will be in scope from the 1st of January 2020. So any new safety data sheets that are being authored will need to follow this new REACH Annex 2. And by the 31st of December 2022, all safety data sheets should be updated and in that new format. So the biggest changes are around section 1, having the inclusion of the UFI and or nano materials, and of course the physical properties has also big changes in there as well. Now these are quite demanding timescales, and when we were looking at the comments that were involved in the consultations, a lot of the comments were around the fact that it was such demanding timescales. And so I guess it's possible that when we do have the final piece of legislation published, that the European Commission will include a more realistic timeframe in the final version. So that's REACH Annex 2. I can already see lots of questions coming in, which is lovely. Please do keep them coming. We're going to move on to the SCIP database now. So the SCIP database is substances of concern in articles as such or in complex products, and it's been established under the Waste Framework Directive. So what that means is that if you supply an article that contains a substance of very high concern that's on the candidate list in a concentration above 0.1% weight by weight, then you will have to provide information on these articles and the substance of very high concern to ECHA. And this requirement is coming into play from the 5th of January 2021. So I think it's time to pop to another poll, and we'll have a look to see whether or not your articles or complex objects or your
percent of people who have said no, their articles do not contain SVHC, which I suppose is good news. But then we've also got 38% people who said that yes, a few of them do. So does that mean that this database doesn't affect people who've said no, or it still does? And what happens with people who have a few of them in their products? So what are the next steps for all of them, basically?
Yeah, so I guess for those that say no, as you say, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, because there aren't requirements. I guess hopefully we will just double check in the next few slides that no actually is the correct answer there for everybody. And then, yeah, you've got 38% and 5% that have got a yes in there. And clearly they're going to have obligations to do under this piece of legislation. And then I'm hoping that we can maybe help those 11% that don't know if it's a terminology thing. So we'll have a look at that as we move on as well. So let's have a look at who the regulations apply to. So they apply to importers, distributors, manufacturers and assemblers. They don't apply to those who supply directly to consumers and those that are outside of Europe. It will be implemented into national law, and then it will be up to the government of each member state to actually enforce this piece of legislation. So a few practical applications. So ECHA are currently creating the IT tools to enable companies to be able to make and meet the requirements of SCIP. So ECHA will use the ECHA submission portal, the ECHA cloud-based service. This is very similar to the Poison Centre notification tool. So it's an online tool that will help to prepare and submit the required information. And there are, again, like the Poison Centre notification tool, there are 3 ways of doing this. So you have a user interface dossier preparation tool for users who wish to prepare and submit through the ECHA submission portal. Then you can also be preparing them offline via iEuclid 6 and then uploading and submitting your file. And then there will also be the XML format that's done on the system-to-system integration. So a pretty similar setup to the Poison Centre requirements. So the data requirements, so it's similar to the REACH regulations, but also needs more than what is in the REACH regulations. You will need to provide the safe use as well as the waste management information, article identifiers within the complex objects and products. You'll have to be able to identify the location and concentration of substance of very high concern, and there must be enough information to be able to identify the component that contains the substance of very high concern. And I guess it's probably worth mentioning why we have this. So the Waste Framework Directive sets out measures addressing the adverse impacts of the generation and the management of waste on the environment and human health, and also for improving the efficient use of resources, which are critical and crucial for the transition to a circular economy. So the intention is to improve the end-of-life management and provide information to waste operators. And actually ECHA have stated that there are 3 main objectives. The first one being to decrease the generation of waste containing hazardous substances by supporting the substitution of substances of concern in articles placed on the European market. The second objective is to make information available to further improve waste treatment operations. And the third main objective is to allow authorities to monitor the use of substances of concern in articles and initiate appropriate actions over the whole life cycle of articles, including at their waste site. So we plan to keep you up to date in the same way that we have been keeping you up to date with the Poison Centre regulations and all of the information as it is coming from ECHA and the European Commission. We plan to keep you up to date with the SCIP database. So if you do have questions or concerns, we're at the very early stages of this new piece of notification requirements. So do get in touch and share your thoughts and your concerns so that we can start feeding that back in to help support you within industry. So next topic that I said we would cover on is the poison centres. Now, as I'm sure some of you or most of you are aware, we've been doing a whole series of webinars on poison centres, and so I don't plan to go into the poison centres in a massive amount of detail, but we do have this Annex 8 of the CLP regulation, the Commission Regulation 2017/542, that was born on the 22nd of March 2017 to harmonise the notification format for making the notifications to poison centres. And as I'm sure you are all aware, the 1st of January 2020 is the first deadline, but it looks like we will have this extended by a year. So it will be the first deadline, the consumer use deadline, that is extended by a year to bring it in line with the professional use mixture deadline. And we still don't have the piece of legislation in place that is actually giving us the extra year's deadline. So I guess there is a slight chance that we still might not have this full extension. It's looking really likely that we will have a few days, possibly in January, where we're not quite in full law or full compliance with the law, but we will be extending that deadline, hopefully through that piece of legislation very early on in January. So just keep posted and keep up to date to see whether or not that is being extended. So lots of people ask me about how to prepare for the Annex 8 notifications, and it's really important to understand your supply chain and establish where you're placing on the market. Figure out if you are a duty holder. There are lots of different roles within the supply chain, but lots of us are going to actually have an obligation to make a notification to the poison centres. Figure out whether or not your products are used in other organisations' formulas. Are there lots of mixtures that are being used within the supply chain? Then start to look at the UFIs, so allocate your internal reference codes to all of your products and use them to generate the UFIs via the tool that's available on ECHA's website, and start getting these onto your labels. Of course, if this piece of legislation for the year-long extension is being brought into play, then we will also have the option to get the UFI added into your product packaging rather than actually on the label itself. So then you need to be creating your notification files, so you will also need to assign your European product categorization system, get your notification files ready and notified in time, and of course just keep up to date with the Poison Centre notification format as we're moving on. It's worth seriously considering whether or not it's worth notifying now under the member state requirements. And I do encourage you to, if you haven't already heard some of the webinars on the poison centres, to go to our website and have a look at some of the recordings of the previous webinars, where you will learn that it's free in a lot of member states at the moment, that by doing your notifications now under the current member state formats, you're giving away less confidential information. There's less updates that would need to be done. If you are dealing quite heavily with mixtures and mixtures, it's worth looking at that. There's the responsible care aspect as well, and not only that, it's the legal requirements. And of course, it gives you a transitional period before you need to get the UFIs on your labels or your product packaging. I'm intrigued to know if you have started to prepare for the Annex 8 deadline, so if you could give me your answers, yes, no, or you're still notifying by the member states.
Right. Seems like most of the people on here, 39% people have said yes, they have started to prepare for the Annex 8 deadline, which is great. That's just excellent to hear. However, quite a lot of people have answered no. And I would just like to say that while the deadline does seem really further away, it will come sooner than you expect it to. Isn't that how it always goes, Caroline? You don't realize it.
It does. It certainly flies by, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
yes, I guess we would, if we didn't have this year-long extension, we would be getting ready right now to be doing these new notifications. And yeah, we've had some since March of 2017, and yes, it's flown by already. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. So I snuck in a slide on Brexit. It wasn't in my agenda, apologies. All I really want to say about Brexit is that, of course, we're waiting for the outcome of the general election, but Brexit is definitely something that should be remaining on your radar for 2020, like you can avoid it. It should definitely be part of your horizon scanning, and definitely keep an eye out and monitor the situation. And of course, if there are significant developments, then we will hold another webinar to keep you up to date. So reach enforcement. So the enforcement forum announced in November that the next enforcement project will be on reach authorization. It's meant to protect the safety and health of workers and the environment. There is also the intention to have a project on substances that are recovered from wastes, and especially those that are exempt from registration will be being targeted. There is also a project on classification of mixtures, so looking at bridging principles in the classification of detergents and cleaning products. And ECHA have also been very vocal about the fact that companies need to improve communication of hazardous hazardous substances in products. And we've also learned that member states are planning to evaluate 74 substances in the 2020 to 22 year frame under the Community Action Plan, so the CORAP. Not to mention the fact that there is checking of dossiers, evaluation, and so on and so forth. So there's a fair amount of enforcement that is likely to be on the horizon in 2020. I also promised to include some information on nanoforms, so nanomaterials. There are new legal requirements for nanomaterials that applies from the 1st of January 2020, where companies need to provide additional information on nanomaterials that are being placed on the European market. And in fact, just last week, ECHA published 2 new guidance documents to help justify the sets of nanos and explain what characterization information needs to be reported. I think we're quite late in the day, given that, again, this deadline is from, or applies from the 1st of January 2020. We've only just seen the guidance come out from ECHA. I expect that there will be more communications from ECHA in 2020. So I think this one is still watch this space and see what is appearing from ECHA. But I would love to know if you have any substances that are in nano form at the moment.
Well, it seems like 64% people have answered no, which on the face of it does look fine, but I would like to clarify here that, as Caroline mentioned previously, the particle characterization under nanomaterials is changing. So it would be a good idea to double check whether or not the substances are still not under nanomaterials. Caroline, what do you think about this result? Anything you would like to add here?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this earlier on today, and I really was unsure as to whether or not people would have things that were in nano form or not. And I guess it's nice to see that, you know, a fifth of people do have things that are in nano form. I guess I would love to be asking follow-up questions to that, because I do, you know me, I do love my questions. You know, I'd like to know whether or not you've done any notifications, or whether or not you've updated your REACH registration file. Have you done any work around the nanos that you have? How are you finding it with the characterization? So if anybody's happy to share more information, it would be lovely to to see that in the chat box or in the question box around what you've done with those nanoforms that you have. But yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for those of you that don't know, I guess it's worth having a look to at some of the guidance documents that have just come out to see if we can help with the characterisation. So the guidance documents that are available on the ECHA website, or perhaps get in touch with us and we can help you understand if you have them in nano form or not. So last area that I want to talk about is polymers. So at the moment, polymers are exempt from registration and evaluation under REACH. It's the monomer or any other substance that has not been registered that must be registered. And this is required if your polymer consists of 2% weight by weight of more or more of a monomer, and if it's more than 1 tonne per annum. Now, the plan moving forward is to publish a proposal by 2020, so this is ECHA that are planning to publish this proposal to bring at least some polymers under the REACH registration requirement. So there is currently some research that's being done to determine which polymers should be registered, and they are being termed this tag, if you like, of polymers of concern. So I think we're a little bit off where we are with the polymers, and that there's certainly more information to be coming as ECHA works with all of the key stakeholders to establish which of those polymers do need to have this additional registration. So once again, we will keep you posted and up to date, but as per usual, I'd love to know which of you have polymers.
Well, we have got quite a fair share of number of people who've said yes, they do have polymers. So I reckon this is a very, very important legislation. And rest assured, we are going to keep you up to date. As Caroline already mentioned, once ECHA gives out guidance on what the list of polymers is going to be, we will definitely let you know and keep you updated.
Yeah, and I guess that isn't really a massive surprise, is it? Because polymers are just in so many different chemicals and day-to-day products that we use. So it just makes sense that lots of people have polymers that they're being used. So yes, let's watch this space on polymers.
And for the people who have answered, I don't know, please do feel free to get in touch, and we might be able to help you in asserting whether or not you have polymers. So yeah, just let us know.
So before I move on to the questions, I think it's worth just reiterating the fact that there is lots going on. I mean, even last week, ECHA published their Mapping the Chemical Universe, the list of substances by regulatory action. So it sounds very grand, this mapping the chemical universe. I think that we can expect 2020 to be a very busy year for those of us that are working in regulatory affairs. And yeah, keep horizon scanning, keep doing what you're doing, and we'll keep what we're doing by keeping you up to date. So I guess it makes sense to do some question and answers, because there's lots coming in. I'm busy trying to read whilst I'm talking. I'm failing miserably, so I'm going to be quiet now and hand you back over to Kriti to ask some questions.
Yeah, we've actually got quite a lot of good questions today. So let's start with a question on REACH Annex 2. We've got a question saying, is it possible that the REACH Annex 2 draft gets postponed based on the comments from public consultation?
Yeah, sure. So generally, when there's a piece of legislation coming out, there is a draft. It is published for consultation. People get to make their comments, and then ECHA and the European Commission take them into account before they then publish the final document. So absolutely, it is possible that it is postponed. It's possible that it will still be from this 1st of January 2020 date. I would be surprised if it was, though, because of the delays to the legislation that I already previously mentioned with the poison centres. But absolutely, there is the possibility that it will be extended or postponed or delayed in some kind of way, because most of the consultation questions or concerns were around the actual timescales for implementation.
Right, makes sense, makes sense. We've actually got another question on STS. So that says, does an STS that has previously been notified without a UFI comply with the Annex 2 if no UFI is listed?
So that's a good question. So if you don't have a UFI yet because you've done your notifications under the current member states, there is a possibility that you have no UFI to put on your safety data sheet until 2025. Are you out of compliance? Well, no, because you don't have a UFI. But you would need to still be making sure that your safety data sheet is updated as per all the other requirements. So don't forget that the section 9 has been changed. What I probably didn't spell out in lots of detail is that the order of the physical properties that's listed in section 9 has been changed as well, and therefore it will be very obvious to people whether or not you have updated your safety data sheet or not, because that table of A, B, C and so on and so forth has been updated and changed order. So whether or not you have a UFI to include on there or not, there are other changes that you'll need to be taking into account, same as the changing of the wording in section 14.7 as well, for example.
Same as any regulatory legislation, if you ask me, really. There's so many changes going on. Well, we also have a lot of questions around poison centers as usual. There's lots of doubts there. So let's start with this one where it says, when will the workability issues for poison centers be solved and be included in the guidance? Because if we lose 6 months, if it comes halfway in 2020, or because of the postponement for products involved, so what happens there?
Yeah. I mean, it's just where we are, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So this piece of legislation, this first amendment that is the one that we're expecting to be published in January. That is just the first of probably 2 amendments that we will see this year. And you're right, the second amendment will probably be halfway through 2020. There's still discussions going on at the moment about the workability issues and how they will be being solved. And so yeah, ECHA or the message from ECHA is that it will be halfway through 2020. Generally, these things do tend to slide a little bit, so I would probably think it's more likely to be Q3 of 2020, which means that it's very close to that first deadline, that even with it having the extension. So yeah, not an ideal situation, but I guess that's one of the drivers for us to having this year-long extension anyway.
So you heard her. Get ready with your UFIs. Well, we also have another one which says, are nowadays performed notifications according to Annex 8 in PCN portal ECHA already valid?
So I am aware that there are people that have already made their notifications through the PCN portal, and they are just sat there in limbo at the moment, actually, because some of the member states aren't yet able to receive these notifications. So I think you need to be careful depending on which member state it is that you're talking about, because some member states have a requirement for them to have downloaded the notification file before you can then put your mixture onto the market. So yes, you've done your notification, but no, they possibly haven't made it to the actual poison centre, and therefore you just need to be careful depending on which country it is that you're doing. But yeah, I mean, the portal's there and it's live, and it's okay to make your notifications now. Yeah.
And on the same subject, because you mentioned mixtures, so we've got a question asking, if the same mixture goes under many different products, do they need to include all product names and create the same UFI for each product?
Yes and no.
Well, that's easy, isn't it? That's excellent.
So companies will need to include all of the different trade names, product names, mixture names, however you want to call them. They all need to be listed. Do you need to have the same UFI? So the minimum is to have a minimum of one UFI per mixture, but you can have multiple UFIs for different mixtures. So if you wanted to have the same mixture with 2 different UFIs, that's perfectly acceptable. So you might want to split it out and have more. So I stand by my yes, but also no answer.
Okay, we've got a question about the transitional period here. So since the compliance deadline of Annex 8 for professional use is 2021, as long as people notified to the member states before 2021 under Article 45, would they be able to take benefit of the transitional period until 2025?
Yeah, so anything that's done under the current member state format has until 2025 before you need to do it in the new harmonised format. There will come a point where I think the poison centres will switch over to the Annex 8,
Okay.
and I think it depends on the poison centre country as to who will do it when. So for now, all the countries are still accepting it in their own format. But I guess maybe around June, July, August, September, October, somebody might decide that they want to only take it under the new Annex 8 format. So if you do want to take advantage of the transitional period, I would encourage you to do that sooner rather than later. Not only is it a legal requirement, but you may find that you can't benefit from it as it gets closer to that first deadline.
Definitely, and I think you also have a video where you explain the benefits of notifying now, don't you? Which is basically the same message, isn't it? So if you are still confused, I do recommend that you watch Caroline live, telling you about all of the benefits of notifying now in detail.
Yeah, the video she loves so much.
We've actually got another question here, which is how is the UFI generated for a single product?
Oh, okay. So it's possibly worth having a look at the Poison Centre webinar where I've got screenshots, but there is a part of the website, the Poison Centre website, that has the UFI generator already on there. You would need to put in your own unique number, so you can pick a number between 1 and like 236 million, something like that, and therefore it then creates your UFI. So if you've got 5 mixtures, for example, you can give them your own internal code of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and then put in your company's VAT number and click the button, and it will magically generate your UFIs for you. But like I say, I think in both of our last 2 webinars, there's screenshots of that particular part of the website. And if you're still struggling, then please do get in touch, Kevin, and I'm very happy to talk you through it.
We actually have another question confirming the date here. So could you please confirm the date that the Annex 2 STS change would be implemented?
So it's the 1st of January 2020 that the legislation should be being implemented if we go by what is in the REACH Annex 2 draft. But of course, this isn't a published piece of legislation. What are we today, like the 10th of December? 9th, I'm already a day ahead. So we're the 9th of December. So we're going to be really hard pushed to have this piece of legislation published ready for that 1st of January 2020. But if we go by what is in the draft, it's the 1st of January 2020 implementation, with a requirement to have all STSs updated by the 31st of December 2022.
Well, that were a lot of questions around poison centers. I think it's time we take up 1 or 2 questions about nanoforms. So I think if I read it correctly, there are a few people who are concerned because the raw material formulators use the definition deliberately produced as nanoform to claim they're not concerned. Do you think that definition is going to change in 2020?
Yeah, Nicholas, that's a good question, and I think I'm probably going to have to go away and come back to you on that one, because I'm not sure, because as I'm sure you're aware, we've had very little that's come from ECHA. We've got 2 guidance documents. There isn't a massive amount of information, and in fact it's only been recently that we've even had a definition of nanoform that's been agreed throughout everybody. So I don't know if that definition will change or not. I think we have to wait to see what comes from ECHA. We are expecting to have more in the way of webinars and guidance documents that are coming out, and I haven't been on any of the nanoforms working groups, so I must admit I don't have lots of inside information on the nanoforms, but I will do a little bit digging and asking questions and see what more I can find out.
That's fine. Yeah, Caroline will be right back with you on information, and as I've said before, these legislations are going to come out in 2020, and we will definitely keep you up to date once we know more about either of these. Similarly, we've also got a question on polymers, which I think we won't be able to answer today because we don't have the legislation in writing. But I would still like to extend the question to Caroline in case she has some insight on this. So, how would UK REACH legislation be impacted by polymers requiring registration? Would this be an area of divergence?
Yes, no, maybe. Really, really difficult to know. So
Yeah.
At the moment, UK REACH is following REACH as it is. Of course, this is in the event of a no-deal hard Brexit scenario that we would have this UK REACH legislation. I guess there's still the possibility and hope that we may still remain part of ECHA's REACH system. As a third country, we may have our own piece of UK REACH legislation. It is a possible area of divergence, yes, that is a possibility, especially as the dates are definitely well and truly past our Brexit leaving date. So it would possibly be an area of divergence. Having said that, I think that the UK and the HSE and DEFRA have made it very clear that it's all about human health and safety and the environment as well, and therefore if there's a strong benefit for us to be following this REACH polymers of concern legislation, then there's a strong possibility that would then get written into UK REACH as well. So yeah, I think we need to figure out what happens with Brexit first and then look to see how all of the different chemical regimes are implemented. I think my reaction on this is that it would be something that would be implemented within the UK, but it is a possibility that we could have that divergence.
If you ask me, we should just remove all these questions and just say, when is Brexit getting done then? And then we can actually, answer these questions properly, I suppose.
Well, we'll know soon about our government, won't we, next week? Yeah?
Yes, we will. Remember to vote, people. Remember to vote. Right, I think that is all the time we have for questions today. So if we haven't been able to answer your questions, please, I reassure you, someone from our team will be in touch. So do keep sending them in if you like. But for now, should we move on to the next part?
Yeah, sure.
So I think we've mentioned this before, but NCEC is really delighted to present this opportunity where we're offering a free regulatory health check available to the first 10 customers who register for it following this webinar. The services we are offering include a free substance inventory check against the ECHA list. We have a free safety data sheet check, and then we have a free REACH registration dossier check. So if you are indeed interested in availing any of these free services and think your organization can benefit from it, then please do register as soon as possible through the link provided at the bottom of your screen. And just as a reminder, we also have many resources concerning poison centers, and this slide will link you to our website where you should be able to get these resources, such as the Poison Center Compliance Report and the information pack. We would also be publishing more resources on the new requirements as soon as we know more. And as I've kept saying in the webinar, we will keep you updated, so just please keep a lookout on our website. Now, I've already mentioned this before, but there are many questions that we were not able to answer today, probably due to their customer-specific nature, but I am certain a member of our team will soon be in touch with you. So in the meantime, if you have had any questions today that you couldn't send in, or if you have any more after today's session, then please do feel free to contact us. Our contact details should now be on your screen. Once again, a massive thank you to Caroline for delivering today's presentation and to all of you who have joined us today. We hope you found the webinar informative, and we really look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you so much, Akriti, and thank you for chairing and talking about the results and holding the question and answer session at the end. And of course, as Akriti says, a big thank you to everybody that's attended. Very nice to have seen so much audience participation there as well. So I guess until the next webinar, we will say goodbye. As Akriti said, don't forget to vote in the general election. And actually, I suppose we should be wishing everybody a lovely festive break as well, shouldn't we?
Definitely.
So enjoy the festive activities and have a very happy new year when it gets here as well. And I will speak to you all in January.